when you prioritize, let's start there. When you prioritize freedom of choice, that implies a kind of self-enclosed monad of sorts, a kind of an atomistic sense of the individual that defines himself in separation. Now, if society is made up of those kinds of atoms, it's conflictual.
We'll be at odds with each other.
Yeah. By necessity, but the very logic of it. And even when you cooperate, your cooperation isn't genuine intimacy or connection. It's the other side of manipulation. So there are all sorts of subtle ways that the violence remains as part of the cooperation. That sort of radical individualism, as you pointed out, it's very evident in Hobbes, requires a strong centralized government. So ironically, radical individualism coincides with a kind of an absolutist sense of governance. And there you have this arrangement that the government in one respect says we're not going to be determining, we're not going to be guiding you, we're simply going to be establishing rights. But because there's such a disorder, the very clearing of space for rights becomes a kind of an intrusive organization and direction. And so we begin to think of things like safety as the highest good that organizes our society. That becomes directive and not just protective.
Right. Yes. And to your point, too, in other books of yours, everyone's got some overarching sense of the good.
Right.
Even if you're denying it. You say, oh, I'm not for all this metaphysical stuff. Yeah. Everyone has something that positions everything else.
That's right.
There's some summum bonum in the system, right?
Inevitably.
And you could say with the liberal system, it is just that. It's the protection of the individual, or it's keeping individual choice, safe or whatever. But there is an overarching sense of the good. So the argument that no, all liberalism is doing is clearing a kind of neutral space in which many points of view can flourish is not really credible, is it?
Well, on the surface, it's plausible, and there's something compelling. And it wouldn't have been so successful if there wasn't something compelling about it, because it seems to leave you free to believe all the things that you used to believe. All of these, you can be traditional in a liberal context. The problem is that in a subtle way, it's changing the landscape. And I mean, in a radical way. I sometimes say that it's allude to this old joke, Stephen Wright. I don't know if you remember him.
Sure.
The one-liners. He said once he came back to his apartment and discovered that all of the furniture had been stolen and replaced by identical replicas. And then his roommate came in and he said, "Have you noticed all of the furniture has been replaced?" And his roommate said, "Do I know you?" The point being that it's the same furniture that's been replaced, and it looks the same, but in a way, its origins, its meaning has changed. And I think that's the kind of thing that we have. We welcome people who have traditional beliefs in a certain sense, but they have to reinterpret them as traditional beliefs that play along with that have sort of accepted this new horizon and this new metaphysics ultimately. So that's important to keep in mind when this question comes up. What do we do now? Isn't this the best that we can do? We don't want to intrude. We have to recognize that there is a deep and serious prudential issue, but we have to recognize that we are intruding. I mean, in fact, there is a vision of reality that is being imposed on everyone. It's not as if the choice is between a neutrality and a substantial vision of the human being. In any event,
they're competing substantial visions.
Exactly. And then it's a fair discussion. Then you can actually have an open discussion.
Right, and it's on the same plane, the metaphysical plane.